So maybe the Indiana Fever are not as bad as we originally thought they were. Because, I mean, yeah, I'm not gonna go out there and say that this is a good basketball team. I'm really not. They're a pretty terrible basketball team. Maybe they're not quite as terrible as we thought. But before we get on to, if you guys are new to the channel, subscribe. We are so close to 8,000 subscribers. If we could hit that after having 7.2 thousand subscribers by the end of yesterday, or was it 7.6k. If we can hit that for 400 after being so far off, that would be insane by the end of the day. Either way, let's talk about the Indiana Fever. So with the Indiana Fever, we're looking at Caitlin Clark. We're looking at Aaliyah Boston. We're looking at Alyssa Smith. We're looking at Kelsey Mitchell. We're looking at whoever the hell their fifth starter is. And Miss Max Contract herself. We've got the Max Contract herself, Erica Wheeler. We call blown open layups Max Contract layups because she does it more than anybody else. But it is very clear the Fever are starting to figure something out, because the way the Fever are going to be at their best is getting everybody going. And I actually didn't feel like it was possible to get everybody going. And when we're looking at the hierarchy of who should have the ball in their hands the most on this team, it should be Caitlin Clark, Aaliyah Boston, Alyssa Smith, Kelsey Mitchell. The reason why I have Kelsey Mitchell down the bottom is that, you know what? Sorry, let's go Kelsey Mitchell and Alyssa Smith. Both Kelsey Mitchell and Alyssa Smith, if they touch the ball, it's going up. It's going up. So you cannot have a first option who is going to shoot every time they touch the ball. But I really liked what they did today. The pick and roll game is something that Aaliyah Boston's going to have to learn to get better at. She did a much better job today. Don't get it twisted. She did a much better job today. Caitlin Clark took smart shots. She shot one frustration shot in the game. She didn't shoot 7 of them like she did against Liberty. But she took one frustration shot. She was on the ball. The team were running some... they were running the high pick and roll. The players were moving off the ball, and it was being successful. But the way the game is that you've got to have... And this is why I was so frustrated with the answers that Christy Sides was giving. Because after the game where they went inside in, where Caitlin Clark did not get the ball back after she passed it in, she then went and completely 180'd the style. They played a game where a lot of it went through Caitlin Clark. The whole show was being ran by Caitlin Clark from minute 1. Aaliyah Boston was there to finish off plays. Alyssa Smith is there to finish off plays. Kelsey Mitchell's there to finish off plays. When Mitchell is trying to create off multiple dribbles, she misses a lot. When Mitchell is there, 4 or 5 seconds to go, can just rip through, go one dribble to the basket, 2, 3 dribbles to the basket max. She can use her speed, her quickness, and her good finishing to absolutely blitz teams. Aaliyah Boston is a decent... When Aaliyah Boston has her back to the basket, she's fine. Like, her footwork's pretty decent. She's a good passer. But if she's trying to shoot over her shoulder, shoot over contact, she's not great. What Aaliyah Boston's very good at is 3 feet away from the basket, those teardrop shots. And if she goes into that somewhere in between a short roll and a full roll and try to roll and immediately seal, because she does seal pretty well, and Caitlin Clark's able to hit her on those passes, that becomes effective. And then you've got to go to your B and C games. If Caitlin Clark is getting blitzed on those screens, you can run that stagger screen play. That makes it very difficult to blitz. Or you can go and get Caitlin Clark off the ball, run her off a couple of pin downs, use the gravity to get the ball to one of an Alyssa Smith, just passing the ball, moving the ball. You've got 4 players capable of dropping 20 points in any given game. So that is the thing, is the talent has never been an issue. And I've said it from the very, very start. From even when I didn't know too much about these players, that this team has a lot of talent, but they just can't figure it out. They can't figure it out in the slightest. But I was this team has talent. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. There is talent in this team. So that's just the way I was thinking. I was they have to figure it out eventually. And I thought the reason they weren't going to figure it out was because of a completely incompetent coach. And I don't think Christy Sides is qualified to coach at the WNBA level. I'm not sure how much, I think her, philosophy on the game of basketball is years behind where it should be. And I think in general, she's not going to be a long-term successful head coach. But, it's very clear that she's game planned pretty well going into games. She has game planned well. She's not been able to make adjustments, but Chicago didn't try to make adjustments. Chicago just played the same way from minute 1 to the end of the game. The same sets, the same non-existent offense, and just pray Kennedy Carter or Marina Maybury bails you out. But they are actually looking good. Like 4 wins in 6 games. And in those 6 games, their only losses have come against the Liberty and the Sun, who have only, other than the Liberty losing 1 game to the Sky, they've only beaten each other. These are the 2 best teams in the WNBA right now. And they're the only teams they've lost to in their last 6 games. If you're asking me where I would rank the Fever right now, I think 7th best team in the WNBA is a fair reflection. I think with the way they're playing, they might be better than the Atlanta Dream. Like, they're in the playoffs right now. They're 5-10. That doesn't matter. 8 out of 12 teams make the playoffs. They're in the playoffs. If Sabali comes back, yeah, fair enough. Wings are better than them. But until she's back, they're better than the Wings. They're better than the Mystics. They're better than the Sparks. They're better than the Fever. They're probably better than the Dream. I would say they're probably the 7th best team in the WNBA. They're clearly not as good as the Lynx. They're not as good as the Mercury. They're not as good as the Storm. They're not as good as the Aces. They're not as good as the Liberty, or they're not as good as the Sun. If they can somehow scrape into the playoffs, and they don't necessarily even need Paige Beckers with the way things are going, if they can scrape into the playoffs, that is something that the Indiana Fever has not done in so long. And then for the expansion, with the expansion draft, other teams are going to be weakened. There are teams that are going to be weakened with the expansion draft. And you just never know, especially because their 2 best players are 22 years old. This team might have a bit of a future. I do think long-term, they got to get rid of Christy Sides. If you're asking me what the biggest problem is for this team long-term rather than short-term, I think short-term, getting rid of Christy Sides will help. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. I think getting rid of Christy Sides long or short-term will 100% help this team. But long-term, I think they need to. And they need to find a coach. They need to find almost like a Mike D'Antoni protege almost. And during the offseason, if Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston don't want to go overseas and they want to play in some of those leagues, the 2 of them have got to just... Aaliyah Boston, if Aaliyah Boston can get into shape where she can be a legit running mate for Clark, obviously not as fast as Stulkey, but... And obviously, she probably is quicker than Sinano. But if she can get into the shape where she is even 80%, 75% of a Temi Fagbenle run the floor, with the other stuff that Leah Boston does well, and the defense she's been playing, her and Caitlin Clark could be near unstoppable. But it's going to take, long term, it's going to take the 2 of them adapting. I think Caitlin Clark's going to have to be almost she's not going to be a 30-point-a-game scorer. And yeah, maybe people aren't going to put their butts, people aren't going to watch for that. But if she can become a 20-point scorer and have the occasional 35-point game, people are still going to be interested. I think the mania is going to end, but the mania was never going to be there. They weren't going to bring Iowa to the WNBA. But I think that a Mike D'Antoni type so a coach with the same philosophy as a Mike D'Antoni, but who actually cared about the defensive end, could turn this Fever team, and a couple of changes to be made. Nalissa Smith's just trolling on social media. She's a pretty decent player, expendable because of how bad she is on defense, and she's a mediocre rebounder. Not terrible rebounder, mediocre. She's expendable. You keep Temi Fagbenle at all costs if she wants to be there. You probably go and keep Lexi Hull. Considering a 2nd-round pick at the end of the bench, you probably keep Celeste Taylor. You get rid of Wheeler. If you can't get a better max contract player than Kelsey Mitchell, you'll keep Kelsey Mitchell. If you can get a better max contract player, you get a better max contract player. And this team might be going somewhere. It really might. But they still are a few... they could be the 7th best team. They're not going to do much in the playoffs this year. But if they do end up making the playoffs and finish as the 7th seed, that's the best case scenario for them, especially after, a 1-9 start from... Or was it 1-8 maybe? Let's say a 1-8 start. I'm not entirely sure. And then suddenly now they're better than the Fever or than the Sky, who started off 3-2.